Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blue Talk. Again, John, Dave, and myself. We're going to look back over Leinster's victory last weekend, all the other Pro 14 action, and of course, look forward to Ireland's game against Wales in the, what it's called, the Autumn Championships on Friday. 8 nations. So we had a good bonus point victory against the Ospreys, 26-7 last weekend. Another great performance from Rhys Ruddock, lads.
Yeah, he's really, isn't he clamouring for Irish selection? The Irish back row has always been so fucking competitive, even when we were rubbish. We always had good back rowers. I don't know what it is about our national psyche that lends itself to back rowerism, but it seems to do. And he, you have to pick him now on his performances, but the other side of that is, well, it's just the Pro 12 lads, and it's just the Pro 14, whatever. You can't just promote somebody. And look, we've seen what he can do before, and blah 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 blah. There's a million arguments against it, but I think he's made a serious case for Irish selection. The problem is, though, has he made a serious case for selection at 6, 7, or 8? Like, he's a 6 every day and twice on Sundays, but there seems to be a huge amount of people who can play 6 and they're not even sure. Like CJ Stander, you would definitely argue, Dave, that his best position is 6. Peter O'Mahony, he's a 6. He has had the Irish 6 jersey for quite a while, maybe coming to an end now, starting to. We've been playing Doris at 6. We can play Dan Levy at 6. We can play, we've so many people we can put at 6. We can also put Tyke Byrne at 6. We can put your man, young lad at Leinster, who plays 6, 4, 5, 6, Ryan Baird. We've just got so many people, and we've also tried, he's injured at the moment. We've also tried Max Deegan at 6. It's how do you get the Irish 6 jersey? It's even selection this weekend.
I think part of the problem that for Ruddock, well, not a problem for Ruddock, but the thing he's facing is that, you could argue whether Ireland are playing well or playing badly depending on who they're playing. But one of the areas that is actually functioning really well is our back row. It's one of the areas that, whatever about, is the scrum going well? Is the lineup going well? Argue it's about halfbacks or fullback or whatever. But you can say that the back row is going well. It looks actually, last 2 games, it's looked really, really balanced. So, it's really, really tough for him. But on form alone, he is the form back row player in Ireland at the moment. I mean, there's no question of it.
No doubt.
But if everyone is fit, even for Leinster, there's question marks over whether Ruddock even gets in the Leinster first 15.
No, well, that's it. You see, as from what we've seen at the tail end of last season, beginning of this, when we did have everyone together, he doesn't. But maybe his form has changed that. Maybe his form has forced that game.
Well, you'd hope that the coaching regime allows that to happen. That fellas who are in this, he's probably in the form of his career, that he is rewarded. And okay, it might be too late for him now to get into that autumn international squad, but he's definitely making a case to start for Leinster in the 2 Heineken Cup matches that are before Christmas.
You have to think so.
And to a certain extent, there's a certain validity. Like you were saying, it's only the pro. People might say that it's only the Pro 14, and there is a certain validity to that. I mean, the last 2 games have been against a team that got beaten by Zebre and a team that got absolutely tonked by Ulster. So,
yeah, there's that for sure.
I mean, actually, funnily enough, Ulster have their own Rhys Ruddock in Sean Reedy.
Yeah, he had a great game the other night.
The last 2 games has been absolutely outstanding. So, I mean, everything we say about Rhys Ruddock, they could probably say about Sean Reedy.
Yeah, he's more a 7 than a 6, although he's a utility player as well. And he has been capped by Joe Schmidt in the past. Not by Andy Farrell yet, but you just never know. It's an attritional position. There's always going to be injuries in the back row, but Yeah, I'd like to see Ruddock given a spin. He's 30 this month, I believe. So, he's far from, he's a few good years in him yet.
He's bewilderingly young when you consider how long he's been around.
Yeah, he started playing in the first team at 19,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I was looking at when the team was announced, I just had a look and I thought it was a great blend of youth and experience in it. Like there was a lot of fellas like Ruddock has 178 Leinster caps, Dave Carney, Michael Bent, all in the Luke McGrath 131 caps even, and then you had Toner coming off the bench, and Ross Maloney becoming a Centurion. So that there was 6 or 7 lads in the 23 that had huge amount of experience, and then you had other young fellas like Penny has 16 caps, Milne had 11, Harry Byrne had 13, Tommy O'Brien had 6. So there's lots of young, youthful players also coming through, and the experience that those lads will benefit from playing with the likes of Ruddock and Dave Carney, and basically been able to nearly talk them through a game so that they know exactly where to be and what, where to go in certain situations on the pitch. Like it's invaluable that the stuff that those guys are going to learn from those experienced players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great position to be in, actually, because we were talking about Rhys Ruddock, and James Murphy asked the question: is Conan under pressure for his place in the back row this year with the form of Ruddock and the return of Levy? I'd say anyone who gets injured is under pressure because the guys behind them are doing well. We saw that. We saw it with Ringrose. We've seen it with any of the back row players. Anyone who gets injured may well have a long fight to get their shirt back.
And despite the fact that we've lost, the guys we've lost in the last maybe 3 years, when you look at Heaslip, Sean O'Brien, Geordie Murphy, etc., you look back to the days when we had those guys, we used to say we kind of have 9 top class back row players. We really have 9 top class back row players now. Like there's no passengers in that back row, no matter how deep you go in the depth chart.
No, because even a guy like Josh Murphy, who doesn't get mentioned in the dispatches very often, I'm always of the opinion if you don't mention the 6, he's done well. And I think he's been very good for us this season. I think he's been very well for us this year overall. And he's a guy who rarely gets mentioned in the dispatches, but who every week goes out there and puts in a shift of work.
For sure. And if young tyros like Penny coming up, sorry, Jason, go ahead.
I was going to say, I presume that there's an unwritten rule that if you're away with the Irish squad, that your place isn't, you know what I mean? Like, just say, for example, Ruddock. So Doris is away with the Ireland squad, playing reasonably proficiently over the last 2 matches, and Ruddock is playing out of his socks. But like Doris is playing at an international level, whereas as Dave said, the 2 matches that Ruddock has had Stormers in have been against weakened, lesser sides in the Pro 12. So presumably when Doris comes back, he like, regardless of how well Ruddock is playing, Doris still has, the peck. That he's still ahead in the pecking order.
I'd say he'd probably be still regarded as being ahead in the pecking order, but he'd have to prove it.
He could also end up at 8 ahead of Conan, though.
Yeah, he could. And Ruddock could end up at 6. 8 is Doris's best position.
Yeah. No, well, that's fair enough. But like then Conan, because I think if you're injured, you're legitimately under pressure. Whereas I think if you're playing away with Ireland, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You come back in and I still think that you're still ahead because by virtue of the fact that you're playing for Ireland.
Yeah.
So like just talking about the game, lads, I mean, we were under a bit of pressure, obviously, after the first opening 10 minutes. We were 7-0 down, but showed great resilience to come back. And again, a great blend of types of tries, 2 forward sort of orientated mauls, a lovely try from Dave Carney. For some reason, didn't seem to even smile when he scored it. and then a lovely try with a fantastic pass from Harry Byrne off his left left hand to put Penny away in the corner.
Yeah, that was beautiful. The Ospreys, they picked a very big team to obviously give us a good few slaps, was their plan. Your man Brad Davis, I know he's 783 years old, but he is a belter, and he's a big lad. And even their back row, what they lacked in talent, they made up for in poundage.
I don't know if you could describe any back row with Jason. Dan Lydiate in is lacking in talent.
Well, again, Dan Lydiate, he's not just on Tipperich, you know what I mean? He's a belter, you know what I mean? He's a big lad. He can play second row, even though he's quite short for a second row. But I don't think their back row was the most.
Wasn't set up for mobility.
But exactly, but it was big and evil, and I thought that might do for us, especially when we went down early on. But we managed that yellow card period so well. We actually scored during it. That's pretty impressive when you've only 7 forwards on the pitch. So I thought we showed great heart to come back from that and really take control of the game. Really, I mean, I wouldn't say it wasn't in doubt after that, but it was fairly close to not in doubt. And obviously, once we scored a bonus point try, it was long gone. I think we relaxed a little bit, if I'm honest, after that.
Once we got the second try, it was only a matter of when we'd get the fourth.
Yeah, it was an impressive performance given how we started, But at the end of the day, it's a team who lost to Zebre last week, who, as I say, had plenty of poundage, but maybe not as much sparkle as they could have had in other times. So, I said they were going to be a good team this year, the Ospreys, so cue them going straight down the Cardiff Glitter, Anyway, who do you think stood out? Ruddock, obviously. There were a couple more, though. There were a few good performances in there, and Josh Murphy was probably one of them, actually, that you mentioned. He had a good game, and I suppose he had a lot of work to do with those big, heavy hitters coming at him. Your Dan Lydiates and Bradley Davises, etc. They take a bit of handling, those guys. And I was quite impressed with their scrum, considering those guys pushing against you. I mean, even when we were down to 7 men, we didn't die, and we had Michael Milne on his first start, who he didn't get murdered, and he was up against a fella who's Tongan caps, who's big, ugly.
He survived, which is, I mean, when you consider, what is he, 20?
Yeah.
So
he's certainly willing for work. He took a lot of ball out.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's playing the loose superb, but in the scrum, when you're 20 and you're up, as John says, against a Tongan international or whatever, surviving isn't necessarily a bad thing, at that age. It's part of the learning experience, because he'll have picked up whatever tricks your man, if he's any sort of a player, he will anyway. He'll have picked up whatever tricks your man was at, and will have, be waiting for them next time. So it was a good development match for him. Sometimes you're kind of prepared to take a little bit of pain in specialist positions if you've got young players in there who are just starting out. And I thought he came out of it in the Jason, you're the accountant. Do I mean in the credit column or the debit column? I genuinely don't know.
Credit, I think, will do you.
I don't know the difference, which is explained to I was a kid.
The commentator came up with a tongue twister about the Tongan prop, and just as he said it, Milne took him out of it in the scrum, went through him. I know he didn't do that the whole game, but it was close to it. Maybe your man was tiring, but it was close to when Milne got replaced. But he went right through him in the scrum, and your man, I think we got a penalty out of the scrum, if I'm not mistaken. He definitely gave him a lash anyway. So that was really good to see from such a young guy in a position that's not a young guy's position. It's a real. I know tight head is a more technical position, but even loose head is a very serious bit of stuff, to be
I, to shift things into double digits. One guy we were talking about, Ruddock being like the form guy, and for some reason his face isn't fitting in the Irish squad. We don't know why or why not. Dave Kearney, form winger in Ireland 2020.
Has to be.
Try scoring anyway.
Yeah,
For
but
sure.
playing well as well.
Lowe, him and Lowe, I would say, Dave. Like obviously,
Yeah.
Lowe was, he's been away training with Ireland over the last few weeks, but in the limited number of games, I think he scored three tries in 3 games.
Yeah.
Or
Lowe,
3 tries
Kearney,
in
and
2
Conway are
games.
the 3 form wingers in Ireland.
We'll get on to obviously the 2 lads later, but I totally agree with you about Dave Kearney. And I think maybe because they kind of know what he is and what he can offer, sometimes, you know what I mean, you're kind of pigeonholed a little bit rather than what you can offer today. It's like what you've done previously might have tainted what we're looking for in the future. Whereas if it was just picked on current form and you didn't know his name, you'd say, God, that guy should be in the national side.
Yeah, and you also have Tommy O'Brien, who's been playing really well this season. I have to say he's been a bit of a revelation. Maybe he was a victim of the large team that was picked to play against us, but he's out for 2 months with a ankle injury, which is not pleasant for him or us.
Because he's been playing very well.
He really has. Like
and we're a bit skinny at centre now.
Yeah, and Frawley's injured as well. Yeah.
Actually, question that came in from Ricardo Tiernig, who says, "Greetings from northern Germany, halfway between Hamburg and the Danish border."
Very nice. Stay away from Denmark there, Ricardo.
Yeah. My question this week is the following: how close does the panel, that's us, think Jimmy O'Brien is to nailing down the Leinster number 15 jersey in Europe? For me, he looks increasingly like Rob Kearney's successor.
Hugo Keenan might have a thing or two to say about that.
I think what we were saying earlier about, the guys away with the Irish cap and then coming back in up against guys who are playing really, really well. I think Keenan will probably retain, as Jason said, his spot in the pecking order, but he'll have to hold on tight to it because Jimmy O'Brien's playing really, really, really well.
Yeah, he's an all-round, not just his
his all-round game.
His all-round game is cracking. His
positioning is superb.
Yeah. I'm very impressed with him as well. And I'm not sure, is that his primary position? I'm not even sure that it is.
I don't think it is, no.
I think he might be more of a centre.
Yeah.
Winger, I'm honestly not sure. But he's made a great fist of full-back in the last couple of weeks.
And he's a left-footed kicker as well, which is always useful to have.
True. So that was our 24th consecutive win. It leaves us obviously sitting still on top of the table. We've got 5 out of 5, maximum points, 25 points. Like there's obviously Ulster won as well. They're on 23 points. There's a big gap down to 3rd position. The Ospreys, they're on 9 points. So there's already kind of that. That table is. I know we're only 5 games in, but you kind of have to say it's going to be very difficult for the Ospreys to crawl back up into the 2nd qualifying position in the table, right?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, generally, Irish teams, I was looking at this just at the weekend there, Connacht have lost 1 game. Otherwise, the Irish are unbeaten. And they haven't all played 5 games. Munster and Ulster haven't, and Connacht have missed games. But sorry, Munster and Connacht have missed games. But, 1 loss out of whatever amount of games it is, it's about 17 or so. 1 loss out of that amount of games for Irish teams is, well, on one hand, it's brilliant. And on the other hand, you're wondering, is it, saying something about the league? So whichever narrative you want to pursue on that one is available.
Yeah,
just quickly run
Price.
What's that, Dave?
I said Connacht have only played 3 times. So
yeah, 3 times. Yeah, they've had 2 COVID matches called off. Just quickly run through some of the other results. Obviously, Ulster had a fine win against Glasgow, 40 points to 15 Monday night. I watched that one. You mentioned Reedy, but he had a very good game. Yeah, just very efficient. Glasgow were poor though, tough.
Glasgow were very poor.
Yeah.
Ulster seem to be. I mean, it's often forgotten how many backs Ulster churn out.
Mm.
They do turn out a huge number of them. What's his name who played at inside centre? I thought was very good the other night. Completely forgotten his name. It wasn't James Hume.
I'll never forget. What's his name?
I'll never forget what's his name. I'm going to look this up now because it annoyed me. Because James Hume has been very impressive this season for them. And when you consider the number of backs that actually are away, and that they're without between injury and other circumstances. I mean, having Luke Marshall back's a big boost. There was a time when he was his generation's new Brian O'Driscoll. And unlike a lot of them, actually looked like a guy who might be able to do it because he had the full set. Then he just got murdered with injuries.
Got loads of concussions.
Yeah, absolutely murdered with injuries. But he looks like a player. I mean, they've got McElroy, or not McElroy, McCluskey. But they have a lot of good players there. They've Addison, the Balakoon, who's injured. Stockdale, who I'm sure we'll be talking about later. Lowry, who still hasn't, who has to overcome society's aversion to tiny out-halves.
Yeah, for sure.
Although he seems to have overcome society's aversion to tiny fullbacks, so be interesting to see him given a run at out-half because I mean he was a superstar of Ulster Schools rugby at out-half, and Ulster Schools rugby is a pretty high standard in fairness.
What do you think of Madigan? It's interesting to hear Mark Robson on the commentary. He mentioned it, and then I think they went to someone on the sideline, Darren Cave, I think, and he said, "What do you think of Ian Madigan's performance?" It's almost like there's big question marks starting to appear. That, say with the local journalists in Ulster, are they trying to push? They obviously got Billy Burns there. Maybe they're trying to push Madigan out to get Lowry in there as the sort of the backup.
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, when they would have last had a close look at Madigan, it was when he was leaving Leinster and he was all singing, all dancing, juggling fire, as John likes to say, that whole kind of thing. And I think you have to remember that's 8 years ago now. So he's an older, possibly wiser player who isn't going to try and do everything every time he touches the ball. So I think there's a certain amount of, this isn't the Ian Madigan we bought. Well, it actually is. I mean, he's a much wiser, more measured out half than he was when he left initially left Irish Shores. Whether that's what they want, I don't know, because up in Ulster they've always liked the Davy Humphreys, Ian Humphreys style of lunatic at out half. I'd say there's a certain amount of thing. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a certain amount, a cadre of rugby people up in Ulster. Say there is in Leinster. You know yourself. As soon as we sign a foreign player, the guy who's just entered first year in junior school is way better than them, kind of thing. And I think there's an element of that as well up in Ulster, that they have their own favourites based on their own schools.
This always quite noticeable, and I really enjoy Mark Robson's commentary, I have to say. So I know some people don't. I actually do.
Yeah, it's very much a free-form word association kind of thing, isn't it?
Definitely. But it just struck me that he asked the same. He made it as a comment, and then he asked Darren Cave. I saw this game as well. Scarlets beating Zebre 18-17. I was really. I mean, again, I said it 2 weeks ago when Italy played Ireland, or when Italy played England. Trying to be a supporter of Italian rugby is so difficult because they're the most frustrating team to support because they make so many bloody mistakes. You feel that you could do better yourself, and they had that game for the taking and they completely threw it away.
Yeah, you sent a text to us there the other night, at the end of that game, because I think we were all watching it, and you were saying something. You mentioned about 5 or 6 of those mistakes that they could have won the game if they hadn't done X, Y. They had this option, they had that, and they managed to shoot themselves in the foot because the Scarlets were absolute horseshit. They really were. Like they should have lost that game. It was only Zebra's own incompetence that gave that game to the Scarlets. And they were at home in Scarletania as well. Like, it wasn't like they were on the road in Italy.
I think if Italian rugby hired Enda McNulty or someone of that ilk, it would actually make a huge difference. Because I mean, no, but what I mean is, you look at the systems in place in Ireland that have been in place over 100 years, and they're all geared towards international rugby. Italy doesn't have that yet, so the players come out. I mean, we saw that Zebre team was good enough to beat the Scarlets, except they made mistakes. And they weren't mistakes of a lack of ability; they were mistakes of a lack of concentration, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
These are mistakes that the professional players who are really switched on don't make. And I think that the problem in Italian rugby is psychological rather than in terms of ability or in terms of their physique or physical conditioning or anything like that. They're just not there yet.
It's such a high. It's such a narrow margin, and the higher you go at
1%.
3 or level of rugby, the more it matters. Because. Every team at the highest level trains really hard. Every team is really fit. Every team is very good at their stuff, very good at their specialist positions. Every team, what divides them in the end is quite often just attitude, or on the day. It's obviously there are millions of factors. It's not just attitude, but, it's a huge factor, is my point.
There was in Mark Robson's word salad the other night. He dropped out a stat and then didn't come back to it. And the way he has a tendency to, did you hear that about the difference between away wins and home wins? You
mentioned that last week.
I was wondering what it would be, and funny enough, he took it up. It's gone from away wins have gone from 33% to 48%.
That was interesting to hear.
Yeah, very interesting. On Robbo himself, I think he's like Marmite. You either love him or you hate him. The amount of people that cannot stand every time they hear his voice bang their head off the wall is as high as the people who have a laugh every time he's on. And I think some of his co-commentators, you can hear them going, "Oh, Christ, I'm gonna kill him."
I think the one sentence that has never been uttered in the English language by anyone watching rugby is, "Robbo, I can take him or leave him."
Yeah.
I like him, I have to say. I like him.
So do I. The other match that was on the weekend, you mentioned having
just to point out, he gave us what should be our official club nickname, and I don't know why it isn't.
Cappuccino Cowboys.
I mean, why that isn't our official club nickname, I don't know. Forget this blue stuff or lion stuff. Cappuccino Cowboys.
He also gave us Epi Taioni. He's a centre, but he's the size of a shopping centre. That's gold, that's gold. Anyway, carry on, Jason.
Sorry, yeah. Well, you mentioned the Italians employing Enda McNulty. I think you'd need Mystic Meg to be employed to watch the Edinburgh Cardiff match, because it was fine for the first 20 minutes and then it just turned into pea soup. And I was flicking between that and the Ulster match, unbeknownst that the fog had come down. And I was like, what the hell has happened here? And then they had to show the pictures from the behind the goal. I mean, you couldn't see anything from, 50 meters into the pitch. And obviously Murrayfield is from where the cameras are to the side of the pitch is a huge distance, because it's such a vast stadium, that it must be nearly 150 meters to the far touchline. You just couldn't see it.
Yeah, I sent you that screen grab.
Yeah.
Insane.
Stuff. Total piece of. Well, anyway, in that game, the outcome was Edinburgh won at home 18-0 to Cardiff. So obviously, we take them on at the weekend. So they'll be buoyed from that win. They also won their previous match, which was against the Scarlets in a 6-3 classic the previous week. So their form is coming back. Like, obviously, I think they'd lost 5 games on the bounce between their semi-final and the quarter-final in Europe, and then a couple of their opening matches in the Pro 14 this season. But they won their last 2, so whatever rant Richard has given them in the changing room, it seems to have worked.
Stuart Moore was that Ulster player, by the way. Hey, yes, it did. I'm not sure that Cockrell is actually as big a ranter as people say he is. I don't think that stuff works. I think he's a much more. I think he likes to give the impression that he's a big ranter, because it kind of builds into a kind of an image that isn't accurate, and that gives him an advantage, kind of thing. You see, I'd say he's probably pretty surgical. I'd say he's capable of frightening the bejesus out of you, but I'd say he keeps that. It's like nuclear weapons. It's all right to have them, but you never really want to have to use them.
No, but at some stage you've got to, like, if you remember back to, I think, the second round of matches they played Munster, they were winning, and then all of a sudden, they threw it away. Munster won 25-23 in a game that Edinburgh should have had an away win. And I'm sure he's legitimate to go into the but like that rant, you can't do it every week. You can only use it once in a blue moon. But when you do use it, use it.
I'm sure he did. No better, man.
Like, I mean, just going over the last 5 games, our performances have been very impressive again, with 39 points as our average score, only conceding 13. We're scoring on average 5 tries a game. Like, ridiculously good performance. But if you think back, like our winning sequence, those 24 games, stretches back to April 2018. No, sorry, April 2019. Yeah, sorry. When we played Ulster away, but we lost 3 games and drew 1 against Treviso. But one of those losses was actually against Edinburgh, when they beat us 28-11. So, like, they have, I mean, going back, I don't know, many years ago, they were our bogey team. They knocked us out of Europe a couple of times before we won it under Checa, I can remember. So, like,
we beat them in the first game away in Murrayfield with Rocky Eltham and all that stuff.
Right, yeah. We did.
They were a team that were good, then crap. And then for a while they started to look like they were coming good again, and that loss to Ulster seemed to have put a significant halt to their gallop. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly they can pick up their stride again. As you say, they've now won their last 2, so they might be getting a bit of pace up again. I'm not sure that they're the team they were 12 months ago, 18 months ago, but they're not as bad as the team they were 3 years ago or 4 years ago either. So
I think Gypsy Rose Madigan just put the mockers on them. I don't know what he did, but he got inside their heads and absolutely hypnotized them to believe that he got a drop goal to win the game that they should have won. They had it in the bag, and Ulster looked rubbish in the first half. But anyway, yeah, it's hard to know. It's like we have a 24-game winning streak in the league. It has to end someday. Mathematically, you keep looking at the games, you're going, right, we've Edinburgh at home, then we've Cardiff at home, then we've the Scarlets away. And if we can win the 3 of them, we're taking a 600 and something day winning streak down to Thomond Park at Christmas. But, the minute you start thinking like that is the minute that Edinburgh or Cardiff or the Scarlets come off
the wagon very quickly if you start looking too far down the road.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the team don't, and the coaches definitely don't. But it has to come to an end someday, and the longer it goes on, the statistically more likely it is to come to an end. So we gotta prepare us. We gotta get the counselling in and prepare ourselves for when this streak comes to an end.
But like John, you mentioned all of those back rowers, and whether you're a young Scott Penny or whether you're a Scott Vardy even, who's played in World Cup finals and won Heineken Cups with Leinster. Like, I'm sure he doesn't want to be sitting on the bench. So I'm sure he's very highly motivated to to push to try and get back into that side. Like, you've got such depth that those guys are trying to, and for all different varying reasons, whether you're Ruddock wanting to get back in the national side, or fellas who are out of favour, even with Leinster when everyone is picked, or everyone is fit and they're coming up for big games, they're trying to put their noses back in. Like, does Rory O'Loughlin get selected if everyone is fit? possibly not. He's got a point to prove. You know, everyone has their own agenda. And I think that's what sort of is driving it on and on and on, because all those names that I mentioned would probably get a start in most other clubs. And yet, if you were being honest about it, a lot of them wouldn't get a start if everyone was fit and we were picking a 15 for next week's Heineken Cup final.
I agree with you entirely, Jason. I think one thing that's played into our favour, or certainly into the favour of the younger players, is the way the season is now structured, where you've got a really long chunk of games where the senior internationals are away, combined with the fact so many from Leinster are away, that it's actually really played into the hands of the next guys on the rank. That they can actually get not only just get a game, but they can get a series of games under their belt, and that's really working out well for them. So it's to a certain extent, this whole coronavirus rescheduling that has caused havoc within the game itself has actually, to a certain extent, on the pitch only, worked out in our favour.
Yeah. Great. Just very quickly, because I want to get to the Ireland game, just very quickly looking at some of the other fixtures. And the other fixtures for next weekend, the one that really stands out for me is Connacht Scarlets. Connacht have only played 3 games this season because they've had 2 matches called off with COVID, as we said. Scarlets are 4th in the league in their table. Connacht are 5th. Connacht, I presume, are anxious to not to let the top 2 in their table or their conference get too far of a lead ahead. It's a kind of a must-win game, And then the other one is Munster Ospreys. That used to be such a huge game back in the day. Ospreys, unfortunately, seem to have really fallen by the wayside. Like, they are 3rd in their conference, but they're a long way 3rd. Munster are going very well at the moment. Like, they're unbeaten. They've had 5 from 5. But noticeably, they haven't had any or as many bonus points. Like, I saw the table there. Munster are 4 from 4. Excuse me. They had a game also postponed. But of their 4 games, they only had 1 bonus point from their 4 games. Whereas obviously ourselves and Ulster have had 4 bonus points. Leinster have had 5. So it could come back to bite them later on in the season.
I think you were talking about Munster and Ospreys. Neither team are what they once were, but Munster can at least still remember it. Ospreys have just, the Ospreys are the fake Fleetwood Mac of Pro 14 rugby.
I'm sure you'll explain that one day.
I think is there anyone out there who doesn't know the fake Fleetwood Mac story?
I don't.
No? Oh. Fleetwood Mac had one of their... basically, the guitarist slept with the drummer's wife, so they had a huge fight and came off tour. However, they were contracted to do a tour, so the manager put together a fake Fleetwood Mac to finish the tour.
That's starting to sound familiar now, yeah.
Yeah. It was... look, Fleetwood. If you just made a film of Fleetwood Mac's life, nobody would believe it because it's too ridiculous, and that's just the reality of it. Fake Fleetwood Mac, fake Peter Green, fake Jeremy Spencer.
Exactly. Nice one.
That should be your next movie project, Dave.
Like I say, nobody believe it.
Okay, we'll turn our attention towards the Welsh game on Friday. I listened to a podcast earlier on, and it seemed to be a lot of derision on the RT podcast about this tournament. Like, did they not realise that the IRFU will probably go bankrupt if they don't have these fixtures and they don't get the TV money?
All about the dollar bills. That's the main reason for its existence.
I mean, it was like, if you can imagine how little they think of the Pro 14, then double it. And this is how little they think of this tournament on the RT podcast.
Well,
I'm sure it doesn't have the purity of sport that the autumn internationals have. Look, I mean, it's a professional sport. The bills have to be paid, and who pays the bills?
Yeah.
Bums on seats and television, and there ain't no bums on seats. So
it's not like RTE cover a whole lot of rugby. Like, this is their only rugby that they cover, and I can't. Wes Leddy, is it? Like,
Liddy.
he is RTE's rugby producer, and you might as well have been bringing him to the dentist for a full extraction of teeth. He had showed about the enthusiasm for this fixture. But anyway, it is going ahead. Ireland have made a considerable number of changes, bringing in Kelleher into the front row, Henderson's back in, Peter O'Mahony, Van der Fleer. Notably, Lowe comes in, Jemison Gibson Park, and Farrell into the centre. So I think it's 8 changes in total that they've made. But are they rearranging the deck chairs? Like, I love seeing James Lowe in there, Gibson Park, but a lot of the same faces that we've seen just are coming back into the frame.
Because, and to a certain extent, what you're saying about what people are complaining about is actually quite true, because there's no world ranking points, for example, for this game. There's literally nothing on the line. So that gives you an opportunity.
No world rankings, Dave?
No world ranking points for this game, no.
Wow. And yet they'd have one for Ireland Fiji.
Huh?
And yes, they would have one for Ireland Fiji if we were in an
autumn international. Anyway, look, but what it does is it gives you a free hit. So, because you're not going to get this kind of, this is a Six Nations standard opposition, because it's, it is Wales. But you still have an opportunity, a risk-free opportunity to do things like, for example, bring in new caps like James Lowe, give runs out to guys who have been away from the game for a little bit for various reasons, like Kelleher, like Henderson. And it gives, the big thing we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks is Stockdale at fullback. What this does is it gives you a chance to run minutes into Stockdale at fullback in preparation for, and remember, in January, we're back into the Six Nations proper. So it gives a national coach actually a chance that many national coaches don't have in terms of spending time with the squad and trying players in new positions at the very highest level.
Yeah, I think myself and Jason, if we were the coaches, we'd be fucking dropping Stockdale for sure. Just because of the lack of commitment he showed in his last outing. I'd be getting rid of him, running minutes into, maybe running me boat into his ass is what I'd be doing. But let's not get on that train too much. But James Lowe was always going to get a run out for Ireland the minute he qualified, pretty much, just to see what he could do. And I don't know.
I've received a fair bit of criticism, John. Sorry, just to cut across you.
Yeah, go ahead.
What's your views, lads, on like, say, guys that qualify through residency in general?
No unit whatsoever.
Couldn't care if they come from Saddam Hussein's Iraq or the pits of hell. I really don't care. There's one set of rules for everybody, and yes, some people take the piss a bit, and you could accuse Ireland of taking the piss a bit, running in project players, etc. And other countries as well have taken the piss, whereas true blues like Argentina, who don't really have the opportunity to do that, or
nobody else in the Spanish-speaking world plays rugby.
Yeah, are not in such a good position. Do I prefer to see the 5-year qualifying rule? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a much better idea. I'm quite happy with it. But for everybody that's qualified legitimately to play for Ireland, I don't care. And the reason I don't care is because if you start caring, you're up to this crap about how do you judge a person's Irishness. You can't. It's a load of crap. So I personally don't care who they are, where they came from, as long as they're happy to play for Ireland and they're good enough. I'm happy to see them. And so what if Fred Bloggs, who spent all his life dreaming to play for Ireland, doesn't get a cap because of it? It's a professional sport. I do feel for guys like that. Like, I'm not heartless. I do feel for guys like that, but at the same time, there's the rules. And sorry, it's a big boys game.
I give over more mental processor cycles to the type of grass used in Lansdowne Road than I do to this, and I give no mental processor cycles to the type of grass. Yeah, it is what it is. And I don't care. there was a certain narrative that didn't seem to be the upset over James Lowe playing that there was over Jean Klein playing. Well, there's a reason for that. James Lowe is good at rugby. Jean Klein is shit. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Jean Klein is shit. I would suggest his selection for the World Cup was possibly the worst ever selection by an Irish coach since Richard Costello.
I read a very enlightening comment on Leinster fans a few days ago, and I just thought it struck home to me. Someone just said it just reflects what Ireland is now. Like, if you look out your front window,
New
you
Ireland.
tend to see houses that are occupied by, families that probably are, mightn't have been born in the country. They live here now. They probably have children that were born in the country. Like, the face of Ireland has changed dramatically in the last 20 years.
For the better.
And for the better, absolutely. We're old enough to remember how grey and dull Ireland was in the 70s and 80s. So thank God, people have decided to move here. And
also, isn't it
bring new
great?
influences into the country. And so just to finish up, and it reflects the new Ireland. And if people whether it's CJ Bundyaki or James Lowe, they've moved. I know they've moved here for money, but they have moved and decided to live, pay their taxes, be part of society, and play for a club in this country. There's lots of other people qualify for Ireland that haven't set foot in the country. Whether it's in soccer or rugby or in any other sport, these guys actually make their living in the country. So,
It's the old one about how it's, and I don't want to get into this because it's such a stupid argument about who's more entitled to play for Ireland. A guy who isn't Irish and has no Irish connection whatsoever, but comes and plays here for 3 years, and even if it's only 3 years, it's still 3 years, or someone whose grandma got up on an Irish lad 70 years ago, and now he's entitled as an Irish person to play for Ireland. And then you get into that, as you were saying, stupid argument about Irishness and what constitutes Irishness and all this kind of stuff. So basically, I think we were better off when there was no nationality requirement whatsoever to play for a team. The only requirement was to be selected for it.
When you think about it, the tradition in rugby was that you played for where you lived.
Yes, you represented the game in the country where you represented the game you played in, not the country you played in, to a certain extent. So if you were a true tie-dyed, dyed-in-the-wool Irishman, and then you went to work in London, you played for England because you were playing in English rugby, and vice versa, and South Africa and New Zealand and whatever. You represented the game, not the country.
Yeah. So anyway, moving swiftly along.
Anyway. So, yeah, we took up a lot of time on something we purported not to care about, really, didn't we?
Yeah, true enough. Okay, we know the selection. We've obviously made quite a few changes. We've continued to play Sexton, pick Sexton at 10. Interesting that they've brought in Billy Burns to possibly win his first cap off the bench. I made this point last week. Why are we fannying around with fellas that are going to be the understudy to Harry Byrne for 10 years?
Because Harry Byrne isn't quite ready. You need to percolate him a little bit.
But just take the French team, right? They bring in Ntamack and Dupont. They were not the finished article when they got capped by France. But they have learned more by playing 5 or 10 games of international rugby than they would playing in the French league for 20 or 30 games. And likewise, I get Harry Byrne going out and making his, playing for Leinster against the Ospreys last weekend. That's fair enough. Or even playing against Edinburgh on Monday night. But how much more experience would he gain playing in a full international than playing against, a very weakened Ospreys team, which, a couple of weeks ago, Dave, you referred to our victory against, was it
Zebre?
Zebre as a glorified training run. Like what benefit? Like surely to God, he would get more benefit playing against Wales than he would the benefit that he would receive.
Possibly.
Against
Your point absolutely is valid. But for whatever reason, and remember, he's not a guy that they haven't taken a look at because they've had him in camp and stuff like that. So they've obviously decided he's better in position A than position B. Just the one thing, people often say that about France. France is a very different country with a very different setup. In France, it doesn't really matter. They can sack off a year's Six Nations because it's not the be-all and end-all of French rugby. The top 14 is. We can't afford to sack off a Six Nations campaign to try to develop players because the Six Nations is the be-all and end-all, certainly in terms of where the funding for the game comes from, of Irish rugby. So there is a difference there that you have to take into account.
Yeah, and also the cast of characters behind Johnny Sexton. Like Johnny Sexton, as we know, is knocking on. His contract runs till the end of the season. Will he get another one? And if he does, will it be an Irish one or a Leinster one? Will he still be the incumbent 10 in Leinster or Ireland if he gets another year? We don't know, but the cast of characters behind him is not showing any. Like the fact that we're going looking to Harry Byrne, who's
well, Harry Byrne is, John. He is. Like he's the best of the lot. Like
maybe he is.
He's the best of the rest, Jay.
I'm not disputing that, but he's not Johnny Sexton yet. And there are other guys who could fill in the meantime. Obviously, Joey Carberry, if he could just get back into fitness. But after that, there's nobody with the jersey by the balls. There's Ross Byrne, there's Jack Carthy, Billy Burns. I think, I've never been impressed with him. I mean, he's a good player, but as an international 10, I don't think he's shown any signs of, for me anyway, that in games that I've seen him, that he's shown any sign of being an international 10. So why we're pumping a cap into, I don't know. Like you say, it's a free hit out, and we maybe needed then the depth chart at some point in time.
I just was terribly disappointed when I saw the selection at out half and the selection of Peter O'Mahony. Like it's just the same old. I thought this is an opportunity. Like I'd be getting, reward a form player rather than we know what O'Mahony does. Like, this isn't a rank, this isn't a tournament that if you win, lose or draw, it really matters at the end of the day. But it matters to the IRFU to get money from TV money, but they get that anyway. Like this is an opportunity to bring through some new young talent. And I just feel that we had a chance, but no, we're going to go and pick Peter O'Mahony, who will go back to sit on the bench when we play Wales in the Six Nations next February.
Well, if you look at Wales' response, they've come out with a lot more same old than we have. And I suppose we should pause here for a second to mention the phenomenon that is Alan Wynne Jones, who's going to be the first man in history to get 150 Test caps, which is a feat that, while Sam Whitelock he's 30 caps behind him, might achieve. I'm not sure he's going to catch him because Alan Wynne is probably going to go on to get to 160 maybe. And I'm not sure that Sam Whitelock will do that, but it's a rarity in the game. Obviously he's the first one, but I don't think there's too many people going to get there after him either, the way the game has gone. So hats off, he's a cracking player and a very committed bloke.
If you played 150 times for Leinster or Munster or Ulster or whatever, you consider yourself to have a good career. He's played 150 times for international teams. I presume that includes Lions caps, John.
Yeah.
So for Wales and the Lions, it's extraordinary.
It is. But yeah, moving on from that, they've selected a sea of faces that are very familiar. I don't think they're doing much experimentation.
No, because both coaches are under pressure. Like, we kind of mentioned briefly about Munster bringing through youth. And the reason why that they didn't last year because Van Gaal was under so much pressure. It's a similar situation now. Like Wales have lost 5 on the trot. Their coach is, I'm sure he's going to get a lot of it in the neck from fans and from board members and so on.
Lost their defensive coach. They lost their defensive coach during the week.
Yeah, Yeah, and you know, I'm sure he wants to hold on to his job, so he's got to win that game. So he ain't going to go and say, "Oh, I'm going to cap 5 new players." And I'm sure Farrell is kind of in a bit of the same situation, that you know he's had a mixed opening 5 games, won 3, lost 2, but lost the 2 big ones. He needs a win, so he's going to stick with his tried and tested, rather than pick Billy Burns at out half start and pick whether it's Ross Byrne or Harry Byrne on the bench. He ain't going to do that.
True.
You know, even like putting Murray on the bench. Jesus, we know what Murray can do. You know, he's got 60 or 70 Ireland caps. Like,
Yeah, you'd have to wonder what Kieran Marmion has done.
Yeah,
no.
But like, I mean, we know like when it comes around to February that the team is going to revert back into your, let's invert commas, best 23 players. Fair enough. But this is an opportunity to get new guys and give them opportunities, and let's see how good they are, instead of just rearranging the deck chairs. It's like, look at our bench. Jesus, I mean, this bench is, I just think it's terrible.
I think the tight head is good.
Jason's mate. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Murray, Sexton, and O'Mahony, all their contracts are up, and Keith Earls as well, perhaps. All their contracts are up at the end of the season. I know Murray is on, and Sexton are on huge money. I'm not sure what O'Mahony's on. The rumours are O'Mahony might be moving on to play in a foreign country, but sure, that's just a rumour, A, and B, with the situation, pandemic situation, you'd be wondering, was anybody moving anywhere? Will Rob Kearney actually get to go to Perth? Who knows? But it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen with them at the end of the season. Will they, after this Six Nations, will they be automatic picks as they have been in the past? I'm guessing no. Certainly on Sexton at his age. Murray, if he doesn't get back into some form.
John, who is better than Sexton at the moment?
Oh, nobody. That's my point. Nobody.
Like Sexton could have a contract for another 3 years, because like you honestly can't say there's anyone better than him. But they have to give fellas an opportunity to show. But like at the moment, you know, giving someone 10 minutes of an international isn't really.
Well, what I was point to be kind of making, the last thing on this is just that because they're being paid the big dollar, there's a mentality in the IRFU that you've got to pay them or play them to get your money's worth out of them.
Yeah, but we can say for certain that's not the case, because we know that Joe Schmidt and Andy Farrell are professionals, and if they were told that they had to pick the guys on the big money, they'd be out the door, and they're not out the door.
I'm not saying it's written into their contracts, Dave. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, they would never. You can say what you like about them, and even Declan Kidney. You can say what you like about Declan Kidney, and I often have. He'd never succumb to that kind of. He wouldn't let his team be picked by the bookkeepers.
Fair enough.
And Schmidt and Farrell the same. That would be anathema to them. The reason why they're picking them is because. Like you say, Jay, half of Johnny Sexton is still probably 25% better than everyone else in the country. Conor Murray is a harder one, but then again, I'm of the opinion that Conor Murray plays the way his coach wants him to play.
Possibly, but like
because he hasn't been dropped for playing like that.
But my point, say, for take Murray as an example. Like, why not give an opportunity to Marmion, to Cooney, to Luke McGrath in this game?
Well, in fairness, he's I mean, on the bench. Sorry.
No, he is. No, he is.
Yeah.
Gibson Park is starting.
Yeah, no, you're right. On the bench, yeah.
But like on the bench, give these guys an opportunity so they get 15, 20 minutes or whatever. Like there's a good chance Murray's going to get on. Do you know what I mean? To what? To add to his cap total. Like, it just doesn't seem to make sense. This should be used to develop players, not just to throw. This isn't like, obviously not, it's like a Barbarians fixture where you just throw in lots of different lads, but give fellas who are on the bench an opportunity. I take Sexton. I take that. That's fine. Play Sexton, but give someone else an opportunity who's been picked on the bench. Like we know what Keith Earls does. Keith Earls is a great player and has been a great player that played for Ireland for 10 years. And the likelihood is Keith Earls will start or be on the bench when Ireland play their next competitive match in February.
He'd certainly be in with a shout of
it.
He'd certainly be in with a shout of it.
Yeah. But play somebody and give somebody the opportunity to sit on the bench and let's see what they're like in this high pressured environment. That's all my point is. But like, if you think of, you know, we played Wales earlier on this season, like we had a 24-14 win. And I'd completely forgotten this game until I watched just 10 minutes of highlights on YouTube earlier on. And they were actually over the line. I think it was Hadley Parks dropped the ball or knocked it on as he in the act of scoring. You know, that game could have been a bit closer, a bit tighter than it actually was. But like they were 24-7 in the last minute, and then they scored a try. We had a guy in the bin, and then they scored a try to make it 24-14. But if Hadley Parks had got over, things might have been slightly bit different.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it was one of those games that, it was part of a forgettable campaign. It was a forgettable win. I'm surprised you found 10 minutes of highlights.
7, I think it was, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah. And I mean, both teams are in a complete, maybe not in terms of the players, as Jay has pointed out previously, but both teams are certainly in an organisational rebuilding phase. Wales have been coached by Gatland since I believe the Stone Age, and like we've had what, nearly 8 years of Joe Schmidt. So both teams are in new pastures new. So there's going to be a certain amount of flux as the changeover happens. The question is, does the flux result in the team going forwards or backwards? And that's what this is going to show us, or certainly the next 12 months are going to show us.
Gatland had more than double Joe Schmidt's tenure, if I'm remembering correctly. He took them over in 2007, was it, after the World Cup? Joe Schmidt.
I think he took over from what's his face?
Mike Ruddock.
Mike Ruddock, yeah.
Joe Schmidt took over in 2013 from Declan Gidley. So he had 6 years and Gatland had 12, I think. So it's pretty much, you know.
He had a couple of sabbaticals though, didn't he?
Well, that's true. He did go off the coastal line.
I mean, you're still talking about 2 years in a dozen. So,
but it was also his coaching team that coached Wales the whole time. I'm sure he was probably coaching them by text message while he was coaching the Lions. And you know, he's a bit of a force of nature, our Warren. If it hadn't been for Fitzgerald, he'd be a high cap New Zealand hooker himself.
I saw him play for the All Blacks. I saw him play for the All Blacks against Leinster.
Against Leinster in '89. Yeah. There you go. So anyway.
Yep. Well, anyway, boys, just one final point before we go, just in relation to, obviously, Bledisloe Cup game, Australia v New Zealand. The Aussies coming out 24-22 there at the weekend. What did you think of the 2 red cards?
Red cards.
I didn't see it, to be honest.
Yeah, there were red cards.
Yeah, like I saw a few notable ex-players were quite critical of them, but like that's the laws now, and you know, mightn't have been the way it was in their day, but it is the way it is now.
Isn't that what ex-players always say though? Oh, there were tough lads in my day. Wouldn't you do that for breakfast? You know,
there were shoulders to the chin, so like they were pretty dangerous even back then.
Back in those days, I mean, a player with today's conditioning and physical ability would absolutely crush any player from even 10 years ago. no matter how good they were.
Yeah, you often hear, even like O'Driscoll, who's only retired 6 years, referring to God, the size of them now and the fitness levels now, as if it was back in the black and white days when he finished, But I totally agree. Like, and I see one of them got suspended for 4 weeks, and one of the Kiwi guy got 3 weeks. So, definitely Reds and definitely deserved their suspensions. But anyway, boys, run out of time. So as ever, thanks very much. Thanks very much for watching. If you are following us on Facebook and Twitter, please give us a subscription and give what Dave's doing there a big thumbs up. So thanks again for watching. Cheers.